welcome to episode 9 of Divine Superconductor Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Cass Ingram. Cass has been a mentor of mine for many years. I started with his book, The Body Shape Diet, and then I jumped into his different books, The Lyme Disease Cure, and he's written actually over 20 books. He's been interviewed thousands of times on radio shows, national TV. Really a fascinating man, and I just love his passion. He's a character, he has a lot of energy, and you can tell he really loves doing what he's doing. He's really into foraging, he's really into oregano and the power of spices. So we talk about that in the interview, but we also spend a lot of time on veganism and meat eating and breaking down a lot of these myths that we often see memes about, and talk about infection, hormonal health, candida, all sorts of different topics. All right, we're live with Dr. Cass Ingram. Welcome to the show, Cass.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Been a long time. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing amazing. Yeah, you've changed my life. I consider you one of my top mentors, and I have 4 of your books here that I've read multiple times. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I love your information on especially protein and viruses and B vitamins, animal fats. And yeah, all that information just changed my life. You also talk about chaga a lot, and I'm a huge fan of bee products. So you're just a wealth of knowledge. I like how you just compile everything, and it's very easy to understand your books, and that's what I enjoy.
It's hard to write a book that is easy to read. In fact, sometimes somebody will sit down with one of those books and read through it in 24 hours or 48 hours. They've gone all the way to the end. I don't know how they do it, but you know.
That's definitely a gift. It's articulation. And how many books have you written now? Like over 30?
Well, it's now 28 in herbal and natural medicine, and a few things I've edited on the divine, the secret scripture they don't want you to know about, and the holy book that no one knows about. And those were edits from original scripture stuff. So, but most of my inspiration coming from the divine sources of how the nature or the wisdom of the wild plants and how that complexity of those wild natural medicines. Plus, as you know, and not to change that, not to alter it, stick with what is made just as it is with minimal alteration. And the same with nutrition. You know from what you're reading about me that I like the royal jelly, I like the propolis, I like the bee pollen, I like the whole food rice bran and the sort of crude extract approach, which kind of puts my work a little bit in the unique area.
Yeah, it's definitely unique information. I haven't heard a lot of your stuff from anywhere else, which is really cool. So B vitamins, you write a lot about pantothenic acid and riboflavin, and especially B12. And I think as a vegan, I was 4 years raw vegan, and I believe I was tanked in that because it kind of burns out the adrenals a little bit when you're B deficient chronically, right?
Well, there are a couple of things with chronic veganism, especially in males, that anybody, that can be catastrophic. And one of them is the kinds of nutrients that you find condensed in animal flesh because of the nature of the animal, whether it secretes milk or whether it's in flesh or in fish or eggs, that it's eating and eating and eating. And certain nutrients are in a high density in animal material, and the animals metabolize the nutrient to make it more bioavailable. That's little known. So when let's say that you're a low adrenal type and you need the pantothenic acid just to maintain the gland health and to produce the steroids. But even if you try to get the pantothenic acid from avocados and beans and nuts, the form may not be that bioavailable. So, but then you're not getting the most dense sources, which are liver, egg, flesh, egg roe, fatty fish, which have a high density of that particular vitamin. That's just one example. I mean, B12 is a more obvious one, right? Because B12, the only time you can get that in vegetation is kelp or seabed material, because that's from the feces from the fish or the clams. But it's not in kelp doesn't make its own B12. That's an animal synthetic product. So yeah, I mean, and even in chlorella, the kind of B12 that's there, or in spirulina actually, is not very bioavailable. So the animal B12 is bioavailable. Animal pantothenic acid is bioavailable. Vitamin D is another example that we have to. And I'm not trying to, castigate or try to impose any idea on anybody. People choose whatever direction they choose, but vitamin D is only found in animal food, with the exception of micro amounts in mushrooms. So it's very compelling, the fact that if you're a strict vegan, you're going to get pretty severely vitamin D and A deficient, you see.
Yeah, especially with non-native EMF environment and 5G. And it's my understanding that even living in a population dense area, it's harder to absorb the sun. And we have 9-to-5 jobs, and almost everyone's D deficient.
We're all D deficient, and the sun, the way the atmosphere now, and different other factors, and smog and pollution, and but another factor we should consider in this is that with the A and the D, you need those for building bone mass, and you need them for also especially A, you need them for the epithelial, like the lining of the nose and the throat, the bronchial tract, and the intestinal wall. Very important nutrient for prevention, also for visual health. The visual purple is produced through vitamin A. And if you're a vegan and you don't have really very good thyroid function, for somehow if your thyroid is fizzling or weakening, then it's very impossible, very difficult to take your beta carotene and enzymatically cleave it to become vitamin A. So you have to look at the different challenges and try to figure out how you're going to adapt to it.
Definitely. Yeah. Have you heard like the mucus? Because there's like the mucus myth going around, like avoid dairy and meat because it's mucus forming. And I've never seen hard research on that.
That's right. Now, that's a very good one. There's a very problematic where there's a tremendous myths and misconceptions and misinformation that have become as if hardcore. Here's the issue. When you eat soybeans, and I forget the GMO issue, let's say they're organic, or if you eat lima beans, which are all vegan foods, or mung beans, or chickpeas, you are just as likely to have irritation in the gut as with milk, because the absorption or utilization of the soybean may only be 70%. So because of the difficulty of digesting the lectins and the type of, indigestible fibers that you're dealing with, and the nature of a soybean or a mung bean or a chickpea, you're left with 20% residue in the intestines. When you eat feta cheese, or if you eat, whole, assuming you're not lactose intolerant, whole organic milk, or if you consume yogurt, it's 99.5 to 100% utilization. Categorical. And egg albumin is almost the same. So we hear about eggs being catastrophic and being mucus forming and being acidic, and yet your body says, what are you talking about? I can utilize every molecule of that egg albumin and then some, and then you're feeding me nothing but beans and grains and nuts and seeds. And then you have to sprout them into oblivion to make them even remotely digestible. And then you're dealing with the goitrogens, or the antithyroid substances, which are a real deal. And if you don't ferment out the antithyroid goitrogens, then you can plug up the thyroid with the almonds and, the raw ones. Not if you cook them, you roast your almonds or you roast your other nuts or whatever, then you don't have a goitrogen. So there's a lot of interesting things out there that I guess only you and I can talk about. Seems like it's banned.
Well, those are incredible points. And I see all these protein powders, and I used to be one of those, throwing bananas and these mixes of 30 plants, and a lot of those are inflammatory.
They're very inflammatory. The worst is pea protein. Pea protein is extremely high in lectins. I bought some of the of life or whatever organic certified pea protein bars, and they made me sick. And I won't touch another one. And it's because of the lectins and the pea protein, which is very, very difficult to digest.
Yeah, I get bloating and gas.
Well, if they just would eat a piece of organic jerky, they'd be better off, huh? Or get some organic cheese and cut it up and just eat it. You'll digest 99.9 to 100% of that stuff.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I just started reading the Bible from Genesis, from the start, and I'm really interested to see your spiritual works. Definitely going to check those out. And the milk and honey thing is really interesting, right? That's kind of the majority of my diet: raw honey, raw milk. Wow.
And you think about that is sort of like the food of paradise, or the rivers of milk and honey, what have you. And this is how God made it. He knows what he's doing. He made a digestible protein, which is basically white blood. And, and he made the chymotrypsin and the trypsin and the various enzymes and the pepsin and the hydrochloric acid to digest that. And then honey's interesting because it's pre-digested, so it goes right into the bloodstream. So both milk and honey actually are highly digestible, except lactose intolerance and food allergy to casein. But now there are other milks, A1 or whatever you call it. I don't know. There's different kinds of milks. So you get this tremendous amount of biological globulin and albumin. With honey, you get full, complete absorption with no stress on the tissues. And so, yeah, that would be a divine ordinance.
Yeah, I have your book, The Longevity Solution, here, and I'm planning on starting a beehive this year. And that's probably the best way to learn, do it yourself.
That is. And in fact, I've been using honey as a drug for almost 30 years, where I would give it to people with congestive heart failure to pull, because of its hydroscopicity, to pull water into the bloodstream, for bronchitis, for bronchial asthma, for chronic cough, for diarrhea. It's very effective. Goes back to Prophet Muhammad said it cures diarrhea, which we found that to be true. Of course, the Journal of Pediatrics took infants and infused honey water into their veins versus Pedialyte, and the honey water was far more effective for infantile diarrhea. Some people say you can't give honey to an infant, and here it is being done in a major journal. And let me qualify that. Raw, crude honey is safe for any age, even a newborn. Crude beekeeper's honey, absolute antiseptic, absolutely safe, absolutely good. And the people who've published otherwise have no clue.
That's a really good point, because I feel like I was kind of raised as a germaphobe, and God bless my parents. I mean, our parents know what they know, and they do their best, but just that germophobic kind of lifestyle kind of weakens us, especially like I was a C-section baby.
Oh, wow.
And there's so much fear about raw dairy and raw honey for an infant, right? But those are generally safe if they're from good sources.
That's correct. They are generally safe. We have a tremendous amount of optimal sourcing now, and I think I should write a book, digestible or indigestible, but in a layperson's term, where the diet should be constructed based on digestibility, which would save the gut, save the enzymes, save the stomach, save the wear and tear on the body. And your milk and honey diet is the most digestible known. But let me also add that the body knows what it's doing. It has its own intelligence. Nobody can give God any credit every time. So here it is that the stomach makes stomach acid, and stomach acid has a pH of 1. And so that's there to kill the parasites, the fungus, the bacteria, the viruses, and to slice up the protein into bits and pieces so that the pepsin can come out and the enzymes can finish the job. So what happens when you go vegan? Now, we have a lot of vegan listeners. God bless them all. We'll try to help them micromanage the diet for their better health if we can. If we can't, we understand that. But if you go vegan for long enough, your stomach shrivels up. It doesn't know what to do. And even if you eat milk and eggs, it'll shrivel to some degree. Now, when Pavlov did his study, remember, just the smell of the meat and then the ringing of the bell caused an outpouring of gastric acid from the dogs. But even the ringing of the bell would do it. So in order for us to make acid, we have to eat flesh. And I'm a big flesh guy. Now, I'm a type O blood. I love grass-fed meat, burgers, and steaks. I love it. I love it more than I ever have. I eat high-quality poultry here and there, shrimp, and some wild fish, although Fukushima is kind of a turn-off now. And I don't eat any tuna from the Pacific, by the way. Cesium. It all has cesium now. And jerky where I can find. I don't ever eat, stuff with sugar or nitrates and that kind of. Now, here's my point. To make the meat healthier, first of all, I like a lot of stomach acid. I want that coming out all the time. I want it always working that stomach. I don't want to get the stupid stomach cancer or some other sicko disease or parasites. But I will put something called harissa in a lot of my food. Harissa is a Moroccan pepper paste, and that helps double stimulate the acid, and it helps protect with its antioxidants the meat. And I'll put a lot of turmeric. I'll put other spices. I'll put the wild oregano. I'll open up Oregamax capsules. I'll put it in. Sometimes I'll put some of the things I've gotten on this new thing that I'm doing, this PurelyWild Naturals I'll tell you about. I'll put some of the plum cleanse in there. This is wild plum. I'll put the rosehip paste. And I will add antioxidants to the meat to prevent some of the carcinogenic aspects. And also, I would highly recommend, if you can eat the meat, eat a big salad so that the greens can help digest and push out, and keep that gut, the intestines moving. Eat the meat with a salad. You don't have to eat the fruit. If you're going to eat fruit, eat berries after a while. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really good stuff. Yeah, I empathize with the vegans because I'm anti-slaughterhouse, and I think you are as well, CAFO farming. Yeah. But how we're slaughtering the animals, like I think, the bolt through the head or slitting its throat, I mean, that's kind of harsh, but maybe like a dry ice, have them fall asleep. There'd be better ways of doing it, right?
Well, if you do that, the blood will pool and it'll cause you problems.
That's true.
You want that blood to get out of there.
What do you think about the cortisol? Because that's another myth. I mean, people say you're eating adrenaline and cortisol when they, kill the animal.
God made the animal as a domesticatable. You can't domesticate a tiger, or the tiger could kill you at any moment. But you can the domesticatable animals are as if they've been planted for the sake of the humankind. We use their hides for belts and for cover, and they've been using that when they didn't have anything else, in tents and teepees. We use their bones. They used to use them for tools and implements. They used to write on scapulas when they didn't have any paper. We use their innards. The animals have to eat them, right? Because they get all the nutrients from the guts. They go for the guts, the lions, the tiger. So they've got to be there for the other animals. And we're another animal too. So if those animals can eat the animal, why can't we eat the animal too? And then we use the glandulars. And then you got to make thyroid hormone. You make pancreatic enzymes for people with cystic fibrosis and pancreatic insufficiency. I mean, you can argue it all you want, but I like it. I like the taste. I like the nutrient density, and I like what it does for me. But I don't just eat meat. I know how to do it. I pound the salad and vegetables with it. You see,
great points. Yeah.
Phytonutrients, and I like getting vitamin A and D and carnitine. Carnitine. You got to have carnitine for a healthy heart, really, right? Carnitine takes the fat molecules and delivers them to the heart muscle. Now, that several of my vegan friends had myocardial infarctions, and they had the infarctions because they had zero animal food in their diet. And what happens was they became deficient in carnitine, which is that amino acid that carries the fatty acids, and they weren't getting enough saturated fat. See, the heart muscle prefers saturated fat as a fuel. It does not prefer olive oil. Olive oil is great. It loves feta cheese, fatty, heavy milk cheese. It loves yogurt. It loves grass-fed meat. It loves chicken with the skin on. It loves duck. It thrives on fat saturates for fuel in the mitochondria. That's published in Guyton's textbook of physiology anyway. I don't know if you need a reference.
No, I get that question a lot. Like, show me the study. And it's like, we've been bamboozled with the vegetable oil industry steering us to margarine instead of butter. And same thing here, right? Cholesterol causes heart disease. I mean, that's a huge meme that people still buy.
They do buy it. And cholesterol, if you become deficient, that's when I worry about you having a heart attack. When the cholesterol level drops to 150, I start recommending high-dose cholesterol therapy. I want those sterols in the bloodstream. I need high amounts of those sterols to coat the cardiac muscle, to coat the nerve fibers in the cardiac muscle, to coat the arterial wall, to keep it elastic and prevent damage. And so I've got to push the cholesterol when it's going too far down in my patients. So I push the eggs and, glandulars and other things. It's
an antioxidant, right? I mean,
it is an antioxidant. And when I see cholesterol level of 280 or 330, I worry about oxidative damage in the patient. And then therefore we give them antioxidant therapy to stem that, whether it be vitamin E or turmeric or berry flavonoids, or there's just so many, right?
Yeah, really good stuff. And just bouncing back to the cow and the animal products really quick, there's a book called The Wildlife of Our Bodies. I checked it out from my local library a couple months ago and loved it. And it went deep into basically our relationship that we built with the cow. And,
yes.
I think it was a Caucasian thing where a lot of people died, but a lot of people developed lactose persistence. And, we're mutants, those of us that can digest dairy, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Is that what they claim?
There's a whole chapter on Mediterrean.
All the studies show that it's categorically that the most digestible of all protein is milk and milk products. And secondly would be eggs. Then third would be meat. And beef would be more digestible than poultry, than fish. So that's just how it is, and I can't do anything about it. You have the 8 to 10 essential amino acids that are easily hydrolyzed by a good quantity of stomach acid and enzymes and pepsin, and then they're broken down and absorbed. And, there are 45 amino acids, and they're needed for cell reconstruction. So in order to have – everybody's taking collagen now. What's the big deal? Collagen is just an amino acid. It's it's in bone broth, but it's also in meat and all these different sources we talked about.
Yeah, well said. And the protein thing's so big because when I was vegan, I discounted that. And, where do you get your protein is the big joke. And I used to say fruit. But, I mean, there's in your book, The Body Shape Diet, I really like that section where you have strong, intermediate, and weak proteins. And the strong proteins are the only plant-based one is royal jelly, right? I mean, everything else is.
Well, and in fact, royal jelly is an animal secretion.
Yeah.
So there you go back to the only way you're going to get these strong powerhouse proteins is an animal product or byproduct. Mm-hmm. And the closest thing would be tofu curd, but then you'd have to find an organic source. And of course, the Japanese have done okay on that. And that is an option. However, you won't make stomach acid and you'll continue to decline in your health. You also can, especially non-Oriental people who are not accustomed to that particular source, you put yourself at risk if you just try to rely on soy, beans, and peas for your protein. That's the certainty. Yeah. I mean, we could hear from people who aren't trying to modify the facts and ask them, what challenges are you having with the vegan diet? How can we help you? How can we help you modify it? Sometimes I'll find some of my vegan friends, and I love them all, that they're very grossly deficient in vitamin A to the point where their vision is being disturbed. They're being night blindness, visual, corneal problems, dry eye syndrome, that they have bumps on the back of their arm, follicular hyperkeratoses. They have dry skin, dry hair, and they have mucous membrane problems and infections and fungal infections, parasitic infections, respiratory disorders. They're starting to develop some of the catastrophic signs of vitamin A deficiency, and then oftentimes vitamin D, and oftentimes they're fracturing themselves. They walk off a curb, step down, and fracture a bone. So we're starting to get these histories from our associates that obviously they are our associates because they're following a vegetable-based diet on the basis it's going to be good for their health. They're not going around eating McDonald's. I'm not talking about the vegan and vegetarians that say they're vegan and vegetarians, but they go get fries and a Coke or something. That's not the other thing. So I'm talking about people who are serious about their health. So when they're that serious, I sit down with them. I say, pray over it. Take the polar power, the fatty salmon oil. North American Herbal Spice makes that polar power from the brain of the salmon, vitamin A and D, natural, not synthetic. Take the polar power, say a prayer over it, and see where it guides you. If you feel good enough about it and you want to protect your body, you want to protect all the animals on the earth and let your body degenerate, I will tell, what for? So a lot of times I say pray over it as a medicine, not as an animal, nothing. Just as a medicine, a drug for your health to protect you. And sometimes they'll do it. Or they'll take the purely back and the polar power. And so they can get better. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, you really nailed it. It's like a spiritual belief system, right? And I remember when I got off of vegan, I actually broke it with a bison burger, and I went back and forth eating meat, but I couldn't eat enough butter. And now I'm on to ghee and I feel even better. But I mean, ghee and grass-fed butter.
Obviously, that's a low density, the butter and ghee, but it's got a little bit of vitamin A and D, and your body's wanting that. So you need to pray over that polar power too.
I love it. So kind of jumping topics, I've been studying a lot about the thyroid gland and thyroid gland conversion that happens in the liver. And can you just speak a little bit on the relationship between the adrenals, the thyroid, and the liver?
Yeah, this is such a critical thing. You can have normal thyroid hormones in the blood, but you can have normal T4, but you don't have a high T3, or it's kind of low normal because you're not having a good enzymatic conversion of T4 to T3 in the liver. So there's liver malfunction, or you could have perhaps some sort of syndrome X where your ability to utilize the T3 has gone down, and that's typically because you have too excessive inflammation or you're taking too much carbohydrate. And the shock insulin that it is interfering with thyroid utilization. But then you also have the issue of fungal overload. So if our diet is too high in carbohydrate, which we're not meant as a human being to gear for a lot of carbohydrate, then you could have fungal overload, and the fungus could interfere with the thyroid utilization too. So you can learn a little bit from a free T3 and a T3 triad or threonine level. You can learn from the T4 and the TSH, but you should really take the Body Shape Diet book, right? And take the tests and find out what you're deficient in, and find out what extreme level is on your thyroid symptom wise, and your body shape as a backup. And then take the adrenal test and take the pituitary test and see if you can trace where is your thyroid sluggish because your pituitary is off, or are your adrenals down so low that the thyroid is being drugged down with it. That's kind of what the book helps you do. But in order to have pragmatic, healthy thyroid function in a male, you have to feed the gonads and you have to feed the adrenals. You have to deal with that. For females, you have to get the ovaries in a good functionality. You have to get the pituitary and the adrenals all in a good functionality in order to have good thyroid function. It's all a symphony and all working together as a unit. There's no such thing as isolated adrenal function.
Awesome. Yeah.
Primary type. The book's focus is you're primarily thyroid, you're primarily pituitary, you're primarily adrenal, then secondary, whatever it is.
Is using the length of the fingers, because that's how I started with. I mean, this was the first book I read by you, and that got me hooked on your material. And you basically look at the index and the ring, right?
Well,
is that
you're a thyroid adrenal, by the way? I'm looking at you. Yeah, but you have to lay the hand flat. So you lay it flat and a dominant eye over it, and you look. I mean, this is after you look at the shape of the body and look for the fat distribution, and you look for the fingernail sign in terms of nails, or ridging, or white spot, whatever it is. Or you look at the shape of the head, you look at the hair, is it thick, is it thin, is it medium? So you got all that data down. And then the confirmatory, if you're still confused, is look at the finger length. So if the index finger is shorter than the ring, that's very typical of a thyroid type, especially if it's on both hands. If the index finger is longer than the ring on both hands, that's a classical adrenal. But if it's shorter on the index finger is a little shorter on one and longer on the other, or that's going to be thyroid adrenal. Yes, it is an exact science when you add in all the other symptomology and signs, right? Yeah.
And does it mean that people are predisposed to having weaknesses in either the adrenals, thyroid, or
It means that if you have a thyroid type, that's what you have to focus on. You have to, like I thought I was an adrenal type, and I was treating myself as an adrenal, and I started getting these creases in my ears and chest pain and angina. And what? I was eating the starch with the salt and not watching my starch intake. What? So I had to go to high protein, like I talk about in my book, because I'm a thyroid type, 2 short index fingers, and then taking the body shape diet, thyroid capsules, then taking ashwagandha for the thyroid and the adrenals, then taking also royal jelly, and then taking anti-inflammatories because thyroid people have pro-inflammatory cardiovascular problems, and cutting back on the sugar. Well, no sugar for me, but just cutting the potatoes out. Big thing with me was the potatoes and the sweet potatoes and the crackers, and I just ditched it all.
Interesting.
You want to get a clot, you're a thyroid type. You're eating starch, and your body can't metabolize it because you don't have enough thyroid activity to burn it, and you get a miserable bunch of fat globules in your blood. You form a stupid clot in the coronary arteries. MI.
Wow. Mitochondrial.
So you say you have MI. I said, no, you don't have MI. You have a thyroid. I got to fix the thyroid, not the MI.
Interesting. You're making me think back to, I've done all sorts of crazy experiments, 100% fruit diet and, liquid diet and all these things. And if we stop it at a certain point as an experimenter, then it doesn't cause damage. But I see a lot of people continuing their experiments way too long, and that's where they can get a chronic disease that manifests, right?
Well, I've had to deal with a couple of 15 to 20-year vegans who were just on the verge of complete collapse, and several cases of carcinoma, a number of cases of veganism-induced cardiovascular events. So I try to coach them that if you're deficient, if you're grossly deficient in nutrients because of your diet, you have to change. You have to modify it. Now, I won't eat meat. Okay, well then you'd better eat royal jelly. I won't. Well, you should increase your milk and eggs and cheese. Really? And then I've protected them. I've helped them out. But I push the thing as hard as I can. If I think if they're type O, blood particular, whatever, and I see that they're degenerating, they need endocrine support, they need animal flesh, and I push them a little bit, I might get them. Well, I'll eat some fish. Okay, good. And I'll have eggs and cheese. That yes, you can. And yogurt, yes. I'll do that. And royal jelly. So I'll try as much as I can to help them out. I've had to deal with a number of people who've gotten spontaneous fractures because they don't have any hydrochloric acid. They can't break this calcium and phosphorus and zinc and copper and manganese out of the food, and they have hypochlorhydria. It's all induced by their diet, and they're grossly deficient in vitamin A and D. I mean, what am I going to do? And then now they've got a load of worms in their gut because their hydrochloric acid shut down. You try to help where you can.
Well said. Yeah, I think you've looked into the connection with all the corporations having their hands in people's health and, getting people on the hamster wheel. And I've been recently looking into the whole, Beyond Meat and these fake meats, and actually Tyson, the biggest factory farming operation is kind of funding this. So a lot of vegans unknowingly are actually paying these very corporations that they hate that are doing horrific things to the animals.
Well, I wouldn't eat fake meat, people. If you're going to go vegan and find some other way. I don't know how you're going to do it, but brown rice, maybe you can add some royal jelly. That would be very protective. Certainly you want to take the oil of oregano, the P73 oil. I mean, if you're one of the ways I've helped people with a restrictive diet is to keep the fungal count down. So I tell them, at least if you're going to go just vegetation, you must have the oregano oil P73 edible daily use oil. And you must have the crude herb with the Rus coriaea. It's known as Oregamax. Not to be commercial, but that's what I recommend. And you must take vinegar with each meal to act as an acid. And you must, and I keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, because I've seen so many disasters in people trying to pursue what's good for their health. Why doesn't anybody do it based on nutrition? The science of nutrition. Has anybody ever heard of that? Instead of this trend or that trend or bone broth or then moving to I don't know, paleo, and and moving to keto, and then moving off, and then moving to something else, and just give me a break.
No, that's well said. Yeah, there's a lot of trends, and I just noticed like kind of looking for studies more than looking at human physiology books, because that's kind of where I'm looking. Like, how does the body work? I don't care about this new latest
stuff. The way
stuff.
you would know would be to look at, of course, my textbook of natural cures. That will be a classic, and that's going to be 1,000 pages plus. It'll have it all in there, but that's a year and a half away. However, you would look at the old nutritional books from the 30s, 40s, and 50s as they were studying scientifically the science of nutrition, in which they found what would prevent, and you would look at McCullum's work back about 1918 as well, what prevented look at Weston Price's work, what prevented degeneration, what caused degeneration, what foods are preventive against human breakdown of tissue. And they are not flesh. I like flesh, but it wasn't flesh. It was organ meats, the butter and sort of cheese, dense milk product component, eggs, of course, the fatty drippings from poultry, and what I said, the drippings. Who's going to eat drippings? If I have drippings, I eat them all. There's not a little even piece left in the skillet or in the roaster. And skin of poultry, and greens, dark leafy greens, and citrus. So they didn't say anything about nuts and beans, did I?
Yeah, I think a lot of people say we're all different, but I think we all need HCl, right? So in that way, we're all the same.
That's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you don't have you cannot believe how many people on super strict vegetarian and vegan diets don't react against this. Just listen. Have developed monumental, massive intestinal parasitism. And how many cases I mentioned, you got to take the oregano, have developed fulminant fungal infection. Now, if you do not address that, you will end up potentially with lymphoma, leukemia, or bulk cancer, bulk tumorous cancers, and you don't want to go there, because by that time, who's going to save your bacon, as they say? So it's crucial that you understand these things. And if you're starting to develop symptoms of bloating and gassiness and weight loss and insomnia, itching of the skin, itching of the behind, and waking up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m, fatigue and exhaustion, anemia, and you don't want to get to the point where you get a cancer from worms, right? So, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I was programmed the other way. I was taught meat causes parasites. There's eggs are full of or the flesh is full of eggs, and those will hatch inside of you, and all this scare stuff. But really, if your immune system's weak, right, and you have low HCl, that's what opens the door.
I don't know who's teaching what. I do know that there are myths and misconceptions that are rife. I mean, one of the most silly ones is the idea that somehow if you take a really good quality oil of wild oregano. Now, I've helped develop this blend, this P73 oil of oregano, and helped popularize the whole idea of an oil of oregano. And I say that oregano because I know what it is. I use it. But if you have a wild oregano oil, and they say, well, you can't take it every day. Or if you take it every day, it could cause liver damage, or it can cause kidney damage. So you don't take it every day. And you take it for 3 weeks, and then you quit. All of that is fallacious. It's actually hurting the general public. The fact is, if you were to get a good quality oil of wild oregano and you took it on a daily basis, it would tremendously improve your immune function. It would enhance the overall immune function, and you would scavenge pathogens much better. You would not get, here's another benefit, you wouldn't get cold or flu. It's not possible. So what are they talking about? Plus the studies, if you want some studies, there's studies show that the intake of wild oregano prevents the liver from being damaged by toxic chemicals, including Roundup. So there you go.
Wow. Probably alcohol too, right?
Alcohol for sure. Alcohol for sure. Certainly Pancreas as well. Pancreatitis, one of the best things you can give is oregano oil. Who would have ever thought that? Hot for hot.
Yeah, I really recommend the Cures in the Cupboard for, I think a lot of people just don't really know the power of oregano. You think
they have no idea. The Greeks called it the joy of the mountain. The god called it the hyssop of the law, saying, purge yourself with it so that you'll be purified. He meant that you won't have any germs or toxins. And he meant business. He put it on all the mountains over there in the Mediterranean so people could harvest it and use it, but they pay no attention.
I get a lot of questions about raw dairy and worried about, listeria and all these bacterial infections.
That's only because of husbandry issues or cleanliness issues. But if you're all worried until you're going to, worry yourself into a wart, then you take the oregano oil, edible oil, and you put 5 or 10 drops in a liter of milk or something. Or get some cinnamon oil if you'd rather have a different flavor. You don't have to worry about anything. You just take action to correct whatever issues that could very well be. And it's possible to you can get tuberculosis in a herd of cows. It's real stuff. But, oregano oil is the answer for that.
I'm planning on having some goats and chickens this year. Would you recommend farmers adding that to their feed?
I would highly recommend you add the oil of wild oregano and the juice of oregano or oil of oregano, juice of oregano to the feed line, the water line into some of the feed to keep the TB down. Well, not TB in chickens, but to keep the pathogens down, salmonella or whatever it is,
That's awesome. What's the main difference between the juice and the oil? Because I personally prefer the juice. It just tastes better to me. It's easier going down.
The juice is the aromatic steam, so that the steam that's condensed as it percolates through the oregano, that picks up the oxygenated compounds, and then that's condensed into a drip. And then that drip, as you know, the North American Herb and Spice people have been instrumental in getting that on the market. So I think it's called oregano juice. And you would take a shot glass of it here and there, or, a couple tablespoons here and there. The oil is more aggressive. So that's something, somebody's got a toenail fungus, fingernail fungus, ringworm, athlete's foot. They have irritable bowel, spastic colon, or they have Crohn's disease, some sicko infection, Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, Lyme disease, sycofungus, candida, bronchitis, sick fungus syndrome, whatever, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. Blast it out with the oil, maybe add some juice, blast it into oblivion.
Yeah, it's the carvacrol is one of the main active ingredients. And does that break down biofilms? Because biofilms
that's a very good point. There's very strong data by Zhang and his group, but actually I've been doing it now for a long time, that if you take the oregano oil like in a super strength form, or now there's this special one called Orega Ultra, and the Ultra is 85% natural wild carvacrol. So that would be the ultimate. But still, this regular one that's in the health food store is super strength. So you take that, and you have a Lyme, or you have mycoplasma, or you have some stealth pathogen that's unrefractory, and so you want to eat that out. So it would do that. You just have to find the dose that works for you to get resolution. Yeah.
Awesome.
And on the PurelyWild level, that new company, PurelyWild, the spruce, known as Spruce Alive out there, that spruce extract would be a great one for the biofilm-related germs, along with the oregano,
I can't wait to try the spruce. You have me excited about that. That's super cool. And just last quick questions on oregano. So topical applications, I take it on my hikes. I mean, if you get a rash or a bite or something, putting it topically on the skin is amazing, right?
Well, topically, it's an antidote for toxins, one thing. For example, a bee sting or hornet or a wasp or a snake bite or scorpion or Gila monster, whatever, anything that could attack you. And what you would apply it topically. But the best thing you could do is saturate a bit of cotton, get some tape, and tape that saturate against that area for continuous 24-hour attachment, and then to devenomize that, and then take it internally. But topically, you're talking more commonly for foot fungus and jock itch, but be careful, how high up you go. And then for obviously ringworm and athletes, what we said, and for dermatitis and itchy skin. Also, if you have a lymphatic or you have congestion and you have a sluggishness or you have a lymphedema or you have, and you scrub that super strength, ideally oregano, into the tissues to mobilize that lymph. Or if you want to help a sick person or somebody that's too weak and feeble to take anything internally, you can take the oil, rub it on the bottom of the feet, rub it on the shins, rub it up and down the thighs, rub it up the spine. Or if you just want to do it for yourself to get the oil into your lymphatics, to protect you or to clean you or to detoxify you, then you do that. Yeah.
I love your YouTube channel, and you have one where you rub it into your, I think, clavicles, if you're doing it yourself. And
this is a good thing to do it right where the lymphatic right duct and the lymphatic duct dump, right just under the clavicle area there. And if you rub it above that clavicle, it'll seep down in and get that lymph to be better mobilized, and it will penetrate into the lymphatics right then and there. And that's a good way to do it with a cold or a flu or pneumonia or really bad serious infection, is to keep rubbing the supraclavicular region.
Awesome. And how much is too much? Because I think people are afraid that it's going to wipe out their good bacteria. And
well, the thing is with the oregano, the body has its own intelligence. And so if you take a low dose of the oregano and the Oregamax, you should definitely try that Oregamax crude herb, then the probiotic count goes up. So let's say you're taking 5 or 10 drops of the oil, a couple, 3 capsules, you get a positive benefit. But if you start to take, I don't know, maybe 40 or 80 drops, 2 dropperfuls, whatever, 4, 5, 6 times a day, you might experience, if they were to measure it, like a 5% drop in total probiotic counts, nothing too severe. But, I guess I tell people on super high dose oregano therapy, take a probiotic at night, eat some sauerkraut.
Yeah. 2 of my favorite stories I've heard from you about the oregano is, one, I think you had an allergic reaction to celery juice and it saved your life.
Yes.
Anaphylactic shock.
Yes. Well, I almost died on that. I've never drunk pure celery juice before because I avoid it. I react to celery and the furocurmurins in there, what have you. I have no idea, but I was dehydrated. I was treating one osteopathic treatment after another, and this good Samaritan naturopath of mine, here, drink, doctor. You're always dehydrated. Drink. So I sat there and I drank about half of it, and I had anaphylactic shock. My throat closed off. I couldn't speak or talk. I squeezed out oregano oil. And so he had a bottle of it, and it shut it right down. Toast. Wiped it out. I wish I could get that information out to everybody with peanut allergy or who has these, then they wouldn't die. They wouldn't go to the hospital. I've seen it so many times. The one guy that got stung in the jugular vein, who was hyperallergic to bee venom, and he fell flat on the ground and started shaking and then was in anaphylaxis. And the guy pried open his mouth and squirted the super strength under the guy's tongue or whatever it was. He squirted it under there, rubbed it all over the bee sting, and the guy popped up 10, 15 minutes later. He was having a cup of tea over there in Colorado in the mountains. Yeah.
Well, that's why I carry around a little man bag or a tote, because I could save someone's life. I have stuff in there that I know how to use that I'm ready to if someone drops.
Yeah, you should. You should freely give it to anybody that goes into anaphylaxis. Yeah, and rub it on the feet and the chest and put it under the tongue and so on. And we should get the word out, definitely we are, that the oregano is a lifesaver and that can never hurt anybody. And anybody that thinks otherwise. Now, I'm talking about the oregano oil that's really wild, not farm-raised. Since I started this, there have been, I don't know, whatever. I understand it, a lot of oregano oils, but I found by gas chromatography, not by inference, that about 8 of 10 oregano oils now on the market are farm-raised on dirt, whereas oregano grows on rocks in a mountain. It's the same with chaga. 8 out of 10 chaga products, nobody's going to go to all the trouble to get the picker, have the picker go out, have them go at the right part of the season. Then they have to dry it so there's no mold. And then they have to pulverize it. And then they have to, they just go to China and get certified organic stock fake chaga and put it in a capsule and put it in a powder and call it chaga tea or some stupid thing. And that's all over the place. Believe me. And I started both of them, and I feel a little bit responsible. Well, hopefully with your station, we can try to educate the people. I'm not giving a story here. This is the hard facts. I started the chaga industry as an industry in the health food stores. I did it with my mouth and also with my books. I started the oregano oil industry categorically. And I hate to see inferior material. So, that's all I can say.
Yeah, no, I've had life-changing results from chaga mushroom and the real stuff, like you said.
Hey, have you ever tried that chaga black tea?
I think at the expo. Yeah, at the expo, you poured me some.
Step up, because that's the pulverized birch bark with the pulverized chaga with rose hips and pulverized larch bark. So there's about 500% more antioxidant than chaga alone, because the bark is more potent than the chaga itself as an antioxidant. And also they have the Chaga Max capsules, where raw chaga, instead of cooking it as a tea, is in with the oregano. I found that to be a fantastic thing for people with skin diseases and who need a convenient way of taking it. So I would look at that, and also the chaga drops, chaga power drops. Chag-O-Power. There's a fake one on the market. They even stole the name, called Chaga Power, with an alcohol base. Chaga and alcohol don't mix. Chaga should be either raw, extracted in a water solvent, as water as a solvent, or as a tea, mildly heated tea, not as a fake powder made in China.
That's interesting.
Chaga grows on a tree anyway. It doesn't grow in a tub in China, okay?
I used to make chaga tea in a crock pot, and I would, after I used up the chunks, because you could use them multiple times, I would put it in a 6 times distilled vodka called dual extraction. Was I doing it wrong?
No good.
Wow. No. Okay. Interesting.
Everything, all the properties, you denature everything. It's just the Russians, experts in chaga, have stated categorically, and all the big players in Russia, none of them use alcohol. It's all an American nonsensical invention. And you're better off just using a water extract if you're going to use those chunks, or to buy the pre-pulverized material and use that. It's already micro-pulverized. And so that's for the common consumer. Instead of buying these chunks that you can't do much with anyway, except for reheat and boil and destroy everything, you're better off with the Chaga Power drops raw under the tongue, especially for skin diseases. The crude chaga pulverized with birch bark and oregano in a capsule, and the tea micro-pulverized for the general public. Now, for some guru like you, and you want to go buy a bunch of stuff from a tree and cut it up in chunks, that's understandable. You got to heat the heck out of it. Excuse the English. You have to heat it into oblivion to get anything out of it.
It has melanin, right? Or something like that?
Yeah, melanin, sure. Yeah, the melanin's the black pigment there for skin diseases. So anyway, that's kind of how it is.
No, that's great stuff.
If you want more information, I'm not saying buy anything, but you could go and at least look at the quality at www.americanwildfoods.com, www.americanwildfoods. Look. And also oregano.com. At least you'll know high quality oregano oil, high quality chaga from the wilderness, and then the spruce extract we were talking about.
I love it. And spices are good for bone and joint health, right? I think I saw you on stage speaking about that.
That's the data. You know that, right? You read the book?
I haven't read the book yet. I just saw I think it was an hour lecture that blew my mind on the osteoblast stimulation and all of that?
That is correct. The osteoblast is converted into a bone-building cell through spices, not vitamin A or D or calcium, magnesium. So the aromatic compounds in the spices go into the bone mass, and they reset the cell nucleus to cause the osteoclastic cells, which eat bone, clastic means eat, to convert to the blastogenesis, or production of new cell matter. And all of a sudden you remodel the bone and you densify the bone. Now, we had the case of a woman whose bone density went up 300% with this spice treatment. And this was the bone active. What she was taking was the bone active rubbing oil. Now, I prefer the bone active capsules with the rubbing oil. But the woman was a paraplegic with thinning bones to the point of fracture upon looking at somebody. So the mother scrubbed her body with the bone-active rubbing oil, rosemary, sage, and oregano, and the bones remodeled themselves, even without any exercise, because she can't walk or even do anything, right? Poor thing. She was injured in a car accident. I hope they're doing well. I haven't heard from them in a while. But the bottom line is that the monoterpenes, or the terpenoid compounds, terpene, gasoline-like molecules in the essential oils, have the ability to penetrate the bone mass where they act on the on the cell to reboot it to function normally and to shut off the inflammation. The bone says, I don't have any more inflammation. Thank you very much, rosemary, oregano, and sage, and bay leaf, or what have you. Rosemary is one of the most powerful. Sage, then oregano. And I don't really need to eat bone anymore because I'm healthy now. That's what happens in the nucleus. Yeah.
That's incredible. And these are almost like weeds, right? I mean, they're so easy to grow, too. I mean, my parents...
Yeah. What do you expect? They love to make things, decontaminate rock and work on bone and rock and tough stuff,
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's super cool. And I wanted to go into Lyme disease, but we'll probably have to have a whole separate episode on that because I don't want to just brush over it. I know you wrote a whole book called The Lyme Cure.
The Lyme disease cure. Well, if you want the summary, you have to do the oregano in high doses, and usually you have to do a multiplicity. You have to eat that biofilm with the super strength oregano oil, maybe if you can find the Orega Ultra, even a little bit better. And, so you have to pound it, pound the Oregamax, pound the juice, pound the something called Oregaros. Now, I'm not trying to make claims for any company. I'm just telling you what I used on myself when I had Lyme and what I've given to my loved ones, patients, and different people. I do a 4-phase protocol: oil, juice, the Oregamax crude herb, Oregaros. Minimum protocol. Bare minimum. I might add in the spruce. I might add in the can of curcumin. You can look that up. But, you got to pound it into oblivion until there's nothing left but, just dehydrated, encrusted, dead spirochetes.
Yeah, you're search on YouTube, Dr. Cass Ingram, and you can find his channel, and he has a bunch of videos on Lyme disease, and that story is amazing. You were literally drinking the tincture bottles, right?
Oh, yeah.
So in a couple drops.
Well, when I had that bad bullseye rash and it went in my brain, started eating me up, because that last couple of weeks when I got it, I wasn't taking any oregano. I was doing nothing. I was just in the wilderness. What are you going to do? You're feeling good. You're smelling fresh air. You're picking wild plants. And that tick got me, and I was mad at the tick and mad at the world, and I didn't know what to do because I thought I was going to die right on this, within a month. And I thought, I kept gritting my teeth. Got to be for a reason. Okay, God, I understand. It's got to be for a reason. Shut up and quit complaining. So I got so sick of it. I'm sick of you, Lyme. You're destroying me. So I'm going to fight back. So I started pounding. I took the whole bottle of super strength, dumped it in a glass of water, and drank it all at once. I did that for 10 days. And I took 90 Oregamax, 45 Oregaros, juice of oregano, a whole bottle, pound, until I beat it into absolute merciless oblivion. But it took me a while. It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that was a fascinating point, that story. You said a lot of people stop when they start having hercs and, the detox symptoms, but you say that's when you hit it harder.
I did it. I stopped a little bit. I got my elbow swelled up like this. I didn't know what to do. So finally, I couldn't stand that ugly Popeye elbow. I went back on a high dose, and finally I chased it up. It took about 90 days,
That's incredible. Yeah, if I personally came down with Lyme, I would use that exact protocol, and I would do PEMF. What's that?
Not going to hurt you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that kills the overdose idea. It's so safe.
I'm not going to hurt you.
So
the Lyme will get you.
Yeah. So I just have 7 short Q&A questions. Someone asked, wanted to see the scale of oregano, if it's more potent than herbs like chaparral, burdock, black walnut, etc. I guess they're referring to maybe antiparasitic or just overall effects.
Well, there's no comparison with the oregano for fungus, bacteria, viruses. Nothing can touch it, and immune potentiation. But for anti-tumor, but for parasites, Sometimes oregano may not be enough. You may have to look at black seed. You may have to look at black walnut, maybe a kind of a triage approach for big worms. Oregano may not reach all the big worms. It will destroy all amoebas and all Cryptosporidium, Giardia, Blastocystis hominis. You don't need anything else. The oregano will take them out.
Good thing to stockpile if the grid goes down, right? I'm always thinking of sustainability and
you sterilize the water, and and a few asteroid strikes, it could knock out satellites. It can happen. I don't know in our lifetime, but you have to have your super strength oregano oil to sterilize the water.
Yeah,
poisoning. You're going to die from the food poisoning. Yeah.
A little goes a long way too. That's the cool part. And so this is kind of a good segue, how to deal with candida. Use the word cure. I know you can't say that, but oregano, right, is very effective against candida.
Oregano oil, super strength, the juice, sip on that. And tough cases, maybe add in this oregano, cumin, sage, oregano, cinnamon all together.
Yeah. Awesome. How much clove can you take per day in the liquid form?
Clove, I don't know. I don't think clove is nearly quite as well tolerated as oregano in terms of high dosing. So reasonable amount of clove would be like, it's got to be in an olive oil base, five drops of the pure oil twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. But in an olive oil base, maybe 2 or 3 dropperfuls twice a day would be a strong clove dose for like deparasiting. Should be enough. Yeah.
Awesome. With regards to the body shape diet, how does that relate to rare conditions such as Marfan syndrome, like deformations? I mean, that's kind of an exception, right?
Yes, the deformations aren't really qualifying as real body shape diet cases in terms of finger length or body length and so on. Those are going to be metabolic diseases. So there could be with Marfan's a big adrenal component. So if I had that, I would be pounding the Royal Power and the Ashadrene on that particular disease. It depends.
That's a super rare condition.
I have seen a case that was in a hospital, and the surgeon he was only 19. The surgeon insisted on changing out his aorta with a fake one, and the kid died on the table. I was thinking, man, dummy surgeon, if you would have just given the kid tons of vitamin C, he wouldn't have, bled out.
Wow. Can diet cure or treat, I don't know, whatever, mental illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar? So can diet help those conditions?
Diet, mental illness connection is enormous with things such as corn, soybean, but particularly corn, refined sugar, maybe wheat gluten. And so you have to take all that out. In some cases, you have to take the milk out and see how they do on a hypoallergenic diet. And there may be things like lamb, brown rice, avocado, maybe cruciferous vegetables, salad greens. Change the diet. And why not give a bit of the oil of oregano to kill their stupid fungus?
It's a good idea. I think mineral imbalance plays a role, right? Because isn't a lot of those things you mentioned just deplete magnesium?
Well, in my experience, my friend, just giving minerals is not very effective for depression and anxiety. You have to go in with the big guns, clean out all the fungus, take out the parasites, fix the thyroid disorders and depression, pound the adrenal support with, I use Ashadrene and Royal Power for that, and correct the B vitamin deficiencies and take out the sugar.
That makes sense because the critters are probably just keep eating all that up, right? You just keep adding more and they just keep depleting.
Well, they make the mycotoxins. Every time you eat sugar, you've got the candida producing the candida toxin, and then that short circuits the brain, and the mycotoxins attack the brain and destroy brain tissue. So you have to deal with the fungal element and the refined sugar first of all in any case of anxiety and depression.
Awesome. Yeah, it's my understanding if what isn't digested is food for critters. So if your cells are able to oxidize sugar effectively, then you're okay. But if you have already all these infections, then you're in trouble.
There you go. I say the first thing to do is to take and get a good quality super strength oil of oregano and the crude herb Oregamax, and to take 5 or 10 drops of the oil twice a day and the 2 or 3 capsules of the crude herb. Clean out the fungus, clean out the nascent viruses, get that gut microbiome in better condition, take out the SIBO, small intestinal bacteria, take out the H. pylori, clean up some of your act, especially if you've been on a restrictive diet and you've mucked up your stomach or your guts, or if you eat junk. Some of the people listening right now are eating garbage, and you're going to be full of fungus if you're eating all the processed foods.
Well said. Yeah. Someone said, I heard you can remineralize your teeth to the extent that you could actually reverse cavities. I've personally experienced that. Or does that depend upon your toothpaste?
I think that it's both. Certainly, there's an oregano-based toothpaste you should really take a look at. Oregafresh is the name, very good, and it seems to be stalling the cavities. Our family has a real high tendency towards decalcification cavities. I have one little one, and I think I'm going to try that with the bone-active rubbing oil in my mouth and with the high-dose bone-active capsules. And then, of course, you want the fatty salmon oil. You want to hit that too, and then the spruce. But the fatty salmon oil will help. And then if you take the bone-active and the fatty salmon oil together, that's a good 1-2 punch.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the A and D is really huge. And the K2, right? I think when I was vegan, I chipped my tooth by just gently putting a glass Myron drinking bottle to my mouth. And
yes, when you were vegan. No, I know this. I don't. This calcification is a pandemic in the vegans. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question. How does athletic stress affect your metabolism? I guess maybe overtraining, right?
Overtraining, overchewing, overdoing everything. What for? You get depleted, you get worn down. A 2-mile walk is better than all that you could ever think of.
Awesome.
If you could possibly train yourself to walk a half hour a day, you'd be in the most best health you could be, even without any kind of hardcore effort. Good brisk walk. Maybe some calisthenics in the morning, 15 minutes. Don't overdo. Err on underdoing. 5, 10, 15 minutes, good quality, quick, proper calisthenics, few push-ups. Go for a walk. Go bicycle. Go swim. That's enough. I mean, if you're not, do more, okay? But, we're talking to 9 out of 10 people. They're not doing anything. And they're overwhelmed in the gym and everything, weights, and just stop it for a minute. Use your legs. You don't have to jog. A brisk walk is better from a osteopathic point of view. If you want to jog, then either one.
Love it. Yeah, I'm above 5,000 feet, surrounded by pine trees, and I got the terpene and all the
best thing you can do there is go for exercise chaos. Walk up and down the hills over stumps. You're in the best place right there. Go for it. You don't even know you've been walking for 2 hours. You didn't even know you were doing anything. It was all exercise chaos with the pine trees giving you medicine all the whole time in your lungs.
Yeah, and I think the pine bark's medicinal, the needles, everything, right?
All medicine for the sake of the humankind. Nobody paying any attention at all.
It's incredible. I had an acorn phase. Actually, I have a YouTube video up where I made acorn bars. I harvested acorns, and it took me a month by myself. No wonder they used to have whole villages processing acorns.
It's not easy to do to get food out of the wild nature. You're right. The Aboriginal people had 10 wives per chief or something happened. I don't know.
What a life. Well, thanks for coming on, Cass. We're gonna close it out, and I have to have you back on to talk about Lyme, because I definitely want to share more about that. I think PEMF can help people, and there's all sorts of things people can do. But
CassIngram.com, Cass Ingram, YouTube, study, learn, investigate.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to close out the show. Just hang in here. Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
That was awesome. Definitely up there and one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. Really liked what he says about digestion and stomach acid and eating meat. I think that's really important, and I think we tend to complicate things, especially with digestion, and think we need to detox more, and we need to do a juice cleanse, and we need to cut out and restrict, when really we just have to go back to balance, not starving ourselves, eating frequently, not being afraid of sugars like honey and maple syrup, And ultimately, focus on lowering our stress. We have so many stressors, and to me, fasting is just another one of those that does raise cortisol and adrenaline when we're in a starvation mode. And so for the thyroid to function, for the liver to function, we need animal-sourced protein, and we need sufficient carbohydrate that's eaten frequently. That's really worked for me, Josh Rubin's clients, a lot of people I've spoken with. Just eating frequently, not starving yourself, and that will help the body to come back into balance with thyroid hormone, progesterone, lowering estrogen, lowering endotoxin. All of these systems come into balance when we start to bring balance into our diet. So simplify. If you've been spinning your wheels, doing all these complicated cleanses and programs, just come back into balance. Carbohydrates from good sources, animal proteins, and saturated fat. That works for a lot of people. So definitely check out Cass Ingram. It's cassingram.com. I'll put that in the show notes. And also check out the company North American Herb and Spice, and especially their oregano product, P73, Wild Oil of Oregano. Super strong. I also love their Oregamax and all of their other products. His PurelyWild tinctures are off the charts, by the way. Pine and spruce extract, super, super powerful, especially for those with chronic infection. If you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you head over to iTunes and give me a review. Also, head over to my website, matt-blackburn.com. That will be in the show notes as well. And that is a website where I share all of my recommended products. I have my e-courses up there, my Amazon store, and all sorts of cool stuff. Today's quote is by Dr. Cass Ingram from his book, Foods That Cure. For the individual with anemia, a careful evaluation by a physician is often required. Blood tests are helpful in delineating the cause. This is especially true when anemia occurs suddenly in the elderly. It is important to rule out the more serious illnesses such as cancer and lead poisoning. In other words, it is critical to determine precisely what is causing the anemia. However, in the vast majority of cases, the cause is nutritional, and the cure is accomplished through improved diet and nutritional supplementation. In other words, the red blood cells, which number in the tens of billions, are literally starving to death for lack of certain nutrients. Thus, the cure is to rebuild them nutritionally. Key nutrients needed to rebuild red blood cells include amino acids, phospholipids, riboflavin, niacin, pyridoxine, folic acid, vitamin A, vitamin E, B12, vitamin C, copper, iron, and zinc. A high-protein diet is mandatory. Obviously, red blood cells consist mainly of protein. ProudFit notes in Normal and Therapeutic Nutrition that protein should be derived from foods of the highest biological value, particularly milk, eggs, meat, and cheese. 100 to 200 grams daily is recommended. This means that an anti-anemic meal might include a 16-ounce steak, 12 ounces of liver, or a tub of cottage cheese instead of the typically skimpy protein portions of the modern diet.